Hello and welcome to Work Theatre Darshan. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. So today, we are going to talk about design. I believe that you know design better than me. So shall we get started?
Sure. Thank you, Karthik, for inviting me for the podcast. Happy to talk about design.
Mhm.
I don't know if I can validate that I know better than you about design, but it's just that I'm in a profession that I'm called a designer. So,
Okay, fair enough, fair enough. I mean, that's a very fair point, but we need to get started with the basics, right? So,
yeah.
what is design?
Um, Design can mean a lot of things. To me, the way I look at design is it's problem solving. But it's problem solving for in elegant way, to find an elegant solution, rather. So because you can say engineering is also problem solving, right? But design is a little more than that, because you try and understand who you're designing for and what do they appreciate.
Okay.
So it's like it's not even a Venn diagram between art, science, and engineering, right? It is Design is a little different that way. We do have to disconnect from our own work, so not kind of assume things. Although we can get away with some assumptions, but not everything, just like math. So it is logic driven, definitely, but it is essentially problem solving with different methods.
Okay, that's very interesting. So as a stretch to this particular aspect of what we're talking, so let's talk about design thinking.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, design thinking, I mean, we had it in B school as well, and there was design thinking with respect to business model design.
Okay.
So we learned a bit of business model design and how it can help startups to create better products and services.
Yeah.
But what do you think of design thinking for entrepreneurs and startups?
Design thinking is a fantastic tool for entrepreneurs or for many professions. As you may be aware, right, the term arose after the industrial design movement took place, and it started becoming a thing. Uh, I take both stances, where one, it is a buzzword, just
Mhm.
like AI is a buzzword right now. But also at the same time, it is good that different professions, get exposed to it.
Okay.
So design thinking that way is a problem solving approach,
Okay.
which was typically used by designers.
Hmm.
Now a lot of others can also use it in their profession as well,
Okay.
be it the user centered design approach, or the think, feel, and do matrix
Mm-hmm.
that you put up on a board and have sticky notes everywhere and try to brainstorm with a team. So all that is useful. But I think you'll have to understand and appreciate when and where to use it. Maybe not every kind of a business might need it, right? If there is some straightforward approach to something,
Mm-hmm.
like if I wish to start a coffee shop,
Okay.
and I know there is an immediate need for that type of a coffee in that place, I probably don't need design thinking.
Okay.
Maybe for the branding of it, but I would have to be careful where to use design thinking. It works with tech startups. It works with a lot of businesses. I've been part of design thinking workshops with IBM
Mm-hmm.
in the US, and the behavioral center for research. I think it goes something like that for Duke University,
Okay.
in part with NC State, and we have worked on very different, problems, like human trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
How can different professions help, solve that?
Mm-hmm.
Be it the law enforcement, be it tech, and how can design thinking help in that? So if you look at it that way, right, there is no business or uh, monetary motive. It's essentially a problem solving method. and it really depends on the context of where you use it.
Okay. It's a very fair point,
Yeah.
because I mean, as you said, it's a buzzword,
Okay.
and there are God knows how many articles that have been written about it.
That is true.
Like speaking of, like say tangible products, like let's say the pen that we use, the chair that we are sitting on, and maybe
Yeah.
this mic that we're talking on, right?
Mhm.
So I think all of that comes under your specific expertise of industrial design.
Mhm.
So what is industrial design?
Industrial design is designing a tangible product for a user in a way that meets a certain need or an opportunity area. And doing it in an elegant way, at least I stand by the elegance factor, because a lot of people these days say design is not just merely about aesthetics, but at the core of it, we were craftspeople who used to make stuff, right? So I would say it is making for the mass.
Mm-hmm.
That's what essentially industrial design is, right? It came from the word industrial revolution. So since craftspeople had to, up their game after steam engine came, and you can make multiples of something, then you need to understand how patterns are made, how molds are made, and that's where slowly the term industrial design started to be coming up. I don't know who exactly coined it, but I'm sure it's somewhere during the 1950s or 60s. That's how industrial design came about. It's roughly around. It's a very young profession, honestly. It's not as old as medicine, so it is fairly new.
Okay.
Definitely not as new as AI engineers, but it's taking some object and making for the masses.
Okay.
That's how I look at industrial design. Yeah.
That's a very valid point. I mean, I totally agree with this, because I was thinking that it could be something like this. I didn't read much about it, but I was thinking that, okay, this is the main difference.
Yeah.
That when you consider a specific, division of design, this is how you want to think about it.
I mean, I would like to also mention that although industrial design traditionally means that, a lot of things that you learn through the process of educating yourself on industrial design, either by going to school or learning through yourself, is that you learn a lot of skills that are, it can cross-pollinate in different industries, like movie production houses. So how can you design objects for, you know, Marvel or, different genres? You can think about industrial design that way also. Okay. Where you can, like CGI, what they say. So yeah,
So
a
basically,
lot of ways you
industry
can
could
go.
stand for any industry. So
Any
that's
industry.
I mean, that's the
But
core of it.
I
I
think
think
tangible product is essential.
tangible product is the
Some
core
essence
of
of feeling that it's a tangible product, even if it's on a movie screen, right?
it. Okay.
So if Thor is lifting his hammer, it should be a real hammer, at least feel like a real hammer. So some designer has to make it. I think Top Gun Maverick, that movie has the Dark Star aircraft, right?
Yeah.
That's made by an industrial designer. So he has done amazing work for a lot of movies. But I mean, you'll find all sorts of industrial designers, like Johnny Ive for Apple. He has done the iPhone and all sorts of things, iPad. So that's how it varies.
So what was your story like, when you got started and got inclined towards this field? What was your story like?
I mean, see, it's not like I was a prodigy at anything design when I was young. I was just curious about things around me. Growing up, I was exposed to things like Hot Wheels, small cars, and any electronic toys that I used to just break apart and just see how things work. And I had a fascination for cars. So I thought maybe one day I'll become a car designer. I didn't even know that that was actually a profession, right until I came to, like, prior to my bachelor's in engineering. So still it felt so far-fetched, right, that profession. I think I started watching Travel and Living channel, and in that there was this show called Overhaulen. Chip Foose, who's a designer, he studied at Art Center in Pasadena, and he uh, designed these cars or restored these cars in a way where within a week it was made. So that was kind of a fascination and inspiration to get into design. Initially transportation design, but over time, it kind of formed my mind that why shouldn't be any object. So many instances like that growing up. I had a sort of one of those knockoffs of a PlayStation with a keyboard, and you can put a cassette in it. And someday,
Nice.
I think my brother did something or I did something. I don't know what happened. My dad, out of curiosity, he just smashed it, and I was heartbroken. So he said, "Okay, all the electronics are still intact. The keys are gone. That's fine. I don't need the keyboard. I don't usually use the keyboard. I use the joystick."
Okay.
So I literally just took a piece of cardboard, made a cutout, flat pattern of sorts, kind of measured everything where the electronic pieces will go. Then made a small box. It was not like it was looking elegant.
So it worked.
It worked. It worked, and to make it look elegant, I just added, the cellophane tape, which are like wide band ones, just to make sure it's a seamless surface. So that was my first brush with design, in a sense, where I was actually prototyping stuff, making stuff.
Nice. I mean, we can see the seeds at a very young age in that way.
I was roughly, I don't remember the age. I probably was in 7th or 6th grade, I think. Something around that time. But eventually, what I figured is design is very expensive. Design education was very expensive, at least at that time. There were not many people doing it, and I didn't know how to use the internet. So I wouldn't say that the internet was bad. I didn't know I could go search on LinkedIn. I didn't know what LinkedIn was. So, but that led me to take up engineering, mechanical engineering in my undergraduate. And then eventually, I did a host of other things, which was not design, because by that time my confidence in pursuing this as a career was so low that I thought, okay, maybe someday if I'm an entrepreneur. So I did a lot of entrepreneurial social work stuff. I got into marketing, sales. I quit that job. Then I felt very dissatisfied with myself. I said, okay, let me take a year break and let's learn about design. And then that's how I got into got my foot in the door with a startup and designed robots, and eventually went to the US, did my master's in industrial design. But yeah, that's I don't know if it was a full circle, because all of the things that I did during engineering is still relevant in design, right? So, but yeah, it took a while.
Nice. I mean, this is very insightful. Like right from childhood, where there was a spark, and in between where you kind of lost the way a little, but you didn't give up. In that way, you didn't give up, and it's really nice to see you, because I was checking out your portfolio and stuff, and like you've designed some really interesting products. But one story that I'm still very curious about is, how did you find your first client?
My first client, that's a nice story actually. At that time, I was not even a designer.
Okay.
I was a guy who had quit his job and was pretty much sitting at home. I used to just go to a cafe before co-working spaces was a thing. So and I used to sketch stuff, read books on design. I used to self-educate myself. And then I was part of I think a mutual WhatsApp group or something, and everyone were introducing themselves, and I used to send out DMs directly to this founders if they are doing anything relevant to physical hardware, saying, quite literally, being very honest, saying, I'm not a designer, I'm trying to be a designer. I would love to work with you. Would you be willing to talk? And if I was very excited, I would make sketches of something that might be useful for them, because I was really good at sketching, sketching products. I had learned perspective sketching by that time. So that's how I met my first client. I wouldn't say it's a client. He was my employer, Balaji Vishwanathan, who is the founder of Mitra AI or Invento. And that's eventually that relationship blossomed. And yeah, I joined as an intern. I had sent him sketches of, I think, some robot uh, truck or something. I don't remember exactly. And he said, "Okay, are you happy to meet this Thursday? Are you free this Thursday?" or something like that. I said, "Okay, that's it's not a typical response from anyone. I said, "Okay, yeah, I'm happy to come by." So I went to their garage in Kormangla in a house, and that's how it all started. So it's just someone did take a chance on me, so I'm grateful for him. Grateful to the team at Invento, and that's how I eventually kind of built my confidence that I can work with other people, even though I might not be the best. So, but I decided, like, you can't learn everything just by yourself. You need some masters who are at their craft, and that's when I started applying to the US much earlier to meeting with Invento's team. In fact, I told the founder Balaji that yeah, eventually I'm applying to all these universities. I'm not. I don't wish to stick with you. I want to be upfront and transparent about it. But he was very encouraging. He didn't say no to that. So because typically you'll think, okay, people expect employee loyalty, all that stuff. But it all worked out well. And least expectation, I was a non-designer. So in design schools in the US, a non-designer is a person who didn't have a bachelor's in design but some other field. And there were very few schools in the US who took master students who did something apart from design. So I had to learn about what a portfolio is, what do they actually appreciate in such an application, and I just sent it out. I didn't expect that any one of them will respond, because I had pathetic scores during my engineering or so GRE or any one of those, right? Eventually they did, and just one of them actually, just by, I think, luck, I feel, and that was North Carolina State University. So I went there, uh, studied under different people who are masters at their craft. So I think only after that I can, then say confidently that I can, take on people as clients. But essentially the first client was Invento, because in between I did projects for them while I was studying. So
That's wonderful. Like, what was your learning journey like? What were the challenges that you came across in your consulting practice?
it's been vast. It's although it seems like just 2 to 3 years and consulting after I came back to India, that is, um, there is a lot to learn, because one, you'll learn the business side of design, of how supply and demand of design is in India. At least I'm speaking to the context of India, and you will understand that you need to talk and approach design in a way which can be relatable to someone who's a founder, who is a person in business, an investor, and also, what are the realities, ground realities of prototyping stuff, manufacturing stuff. So we can't manufacture everything, right? If that was the case, then India would be number one.
True.
So we have to kind of make good research, ground research, calling up people, asking out and finding out. In fact, going to the place where they make stuff to really understand how much can they really push and do what you want to do in your design. You might flush out an amazing design in CAD, but if it's not possible to actually make it, then you're not delivered to the customer. The customer just has a shiny render, right? So that's not going to take them far. So we have to set the expectations right. So that's typically, things that I've learned, hard way, easy way as well. uh, the other thing is, if you're working with collaborators, always, I go by the principle trust but verify. I never did usually, but over the past 2 to 3 years I started to do it. just because it can be as small as a measurement of something. You might trust that person, he might be your friend for a long time, but whatever, for some error that difference is there, end of the day it's going to a person who's paying you money, and that product is going to a person who's actually going to use it, and it shouldn't reflect there. So all those lessons, you got to verify. Someone has to verify that. So there has to be some sense of um, verification, or self check that you have to do for yourself as well. So I'm sure there are a lot more, but these are the things that come to my mind.
Okay. Speaking of what is right or wrong, I want to know your thoughts about the EV market, since you are involved in the EV market as well with Trify. So what are you building at Trify?
So Trify is a EV company. It's more of a, you should look at it more at a services company aimed at developing charging infrastructure for developing economies. So initially we intend to start off in the East African market.
Okay.
And so we are working on developing charging stations and designing those, but essentially to reduce the cost for transitioning for much less developed economies than, say, even India.
Okay.
Because they will always think cost per kilometer. So we have to think in those terms and design, and that's essentially what we are doing at Trify. It's a small team, 10 to 12 people right now, but wonderful work, amazing talented bunch of people. So yeah, it's interesting. We are yet to launch our pilot. Within another 3-4 months the pilot will be out in Uganda.
Okay.
So hopefully whatever I've been designing, I can see the learnings of what I can make some changes if there is. And but yeah, it's a very interesting project. It has to do with interoperability of batteries. So because if you think about it, all our devices at one point, at least now these days it's reducing. You could change from a AA battery in one can still work in another device.
True.
So there is no set standard for a swappable battery in EV two-wheelers or three-wheelers, and in a way, brands do it to protect their IP, but
isn't it bad for the industry? Like in general, wouldn't the adaptability be better in case there's a common battery?
It would definitely be better if there's a common battery, but it's very hard to get people to agree, right? It's if you look at it on the Asia side of things, there are barely 5 major motorcycle manufacturers, and each of them have their own legacy and market share, so they're competing amongst themselves. So when they're competing with each other, typically for them to agree that okay, we need to operate on the same principle is very hard, unless there is some sense of policy that will guide them towards that. I think the GUI policy for swappable batteries is something around the same idea. But yeah, that's for India though. Asia is such a huge place. We have a lot of economies, and there are a lot of companies trying to expand this swappable battery market. But working out the unit economics is not as simple. So you got to think through the cost per battery. So that all dials down to eventually the design and engineering and product development. How efficiently we do it, yet being safe, and yet having the range and all those things. So it's a very interesting thing. I mean, there's no right or wrong. I would say it's yet to see what turns out. I don't know how well it is working out in India because I have not studied the Indian market as much. But yeah.
Okay. That's it. I mean, that's quite interesting. I mean, with respect to the global approach that you're currently having, I want to understand, like, is India a good market for industrial design, or are there better markets overseas and stuff? Like, how do you look at it?
So the way I look at it, it's like any product or service, right? There is a supply and demand, and so for this profession, it's my opinion that uh, we have more supply of designers than there is demand for design in India. Because if you think about it, in any company which makes a physical product, at least if for industrial design, they probably need not more than 20-30 people to design their product line. This can be a major brand, everything, and this can be a company that has 10,000 employees. But you need just 30 designers to actually design those physical objects. You don't need a lot of people. So when you think that way, you will realize that you got to be the best in the game to one, get hired by them, or at least for them to even notice you. Or else it's impossible, right? It's I think what has happened is the charm is very high for design, and it's very evident. There are different types of design also. It's not just industrial design. There is fashion design, UX design, graphic design.
True.
So all this has kind of expanded that word, and I think it's much harder to do industrial design in India generally, with in my context of experience working in the US. But you can get clients in India. You just have to have that credibility and work with clients who have recognized your work before. That's what I found it easier. But also, it's never been a better time to be a designer in India and have clients from outside of India. Okay. So because one, of course, it's the cost for the service. It's definitely more expensive in Western Hemisphere. So, but in terms of the quality of industrial design overarching, that's where we are yet to make a name, but we are getting there. So hopefully maybe in the 10-15 years.
So would you, like what advice would you give to someone who wants to enter this field?
I mean, start very early in kind of developing a sense of curiosity for things. Asking questions and building stuff, getting your hands dirty, and being able to communicate your ideas clearly and presenting that. Because I think these are the three things that are very essential for any designer, not just industrial design. One is to just be curious about why a problem happens, like getting to the bottom of it, and knowing which is the real problem and if it is a problem at all. Because you design for one problem, you might be creating more problems. So you need to know exactly what you're solving and if it's worth solving. So asking those questions through curiosity is very much essential, So at the age, I don't think I would say this kind of characteristics are important for even much younger people, not necessarily for people in their teens getting into college. But then the other two things, what did I say? Curiosity, then
the ability to present the ideas.
Yeah, the
communicating properly.
So those are communicating was actually hard for me. Communicating ideas. That took some time to refine over the years, and that mainly happened through my master's degree. Because it's not that people have bad ideas, people have good ideas, but we don't know whether it is good unless we know exactly what's in your mind, right?
Yes.
So that part of communication, that visual communication through slides, through renders, through functionality, and through sketches. So that is essentially what one needs to develop to make someone go wow with the idea that yeah, maybe I can work with you on this. That is the sense of wonder it has to create when you're communicating that idea, so that it prompts a response. Okay. Without which you might just get, yeah, that looks nice, right? You want some real feedback, like hey, what do you think? Maybe this might work, right? So that is what is needed.
But where can one start? Like, for example, someone like you spoke about reading certain books and getting exposed to experimenting with things. So how do you think someone who's very curious about it, like how can he or she begin his
Begin.
process?
See, one thing, there is no right or wrong way about it. You can start at any step, right? For me, it began with sketching, and I used to draw a lot. I used to draw cars and just whatever real object, even if it was on a magazine, and I wanted to draw exactly that, I would put a tracing paper and sketch over it, so that my hand forms that motor memory of how the lines form across the product, so that I know what was going on in the mind of the designer who actually made the product. So that becomes a kind of a motor skill. So kind of developing that motor skills happened. Then later came the thinking part of the profession, which is the methods of solving, like user-centered design. So that's when I started reading books. My first any interesting book on design was The Design of Everyday Things by what's his name? Don Norman.
Okay, nice. I'll
He's a
definitely put it
very
on my list.
He's a very nice guy, humble guy. Even before I went to the US, I had emailed him actually after I read the book. I said I'm very curious. I want to pursue my education there, and he was gracious enough to respond. Typically, you think people of that stature don't respond, probably have better things to do, but he responded. He said, yeah, there is this article I've already written. I said, okay, let me look into it. So that's one good book, Emotional Design, by the same person. Then apart from that, I used a lot of technical books on sketching, and my engineering degree helped me in CAD.
Okay.
So that's the basics.
Yeah.
So then just learning and practicing every day, right, in any one of these skills will help you. And then there are very good courses online, at least these days. Since the past couple of years, I think a year or a year and a half, there's this course called Advanced Offsite, and this is for industrial designers, if I'm right. And this is taught by industry experts over like 12 weeks. So that's turning out to be really good, at least from the feedback people are giving, because design education, see, fundamentally is very expensive. And one of the reasons I didn't want to pursue here in India was I didn't want to be part of the competitive exams. Not that it is wrong; it's perfectly fine.
Like NID and stuff.
NID.
Okay.
So I just wanted to be a part of a community that has the best designers in the world who have a design heritage per se. So then that's why I went to the US, and even there it's very expensive. So you got to think through before you pursue a formal education about the investment of it. So there are many options these days on how you can break it down. Unlike where at the time, even though it was like barely 10, 11 years ago for me, and these days the exposure is much more. So yeah, that's where I would suggest people to start.
Speaking of engineering, you spoke of engineering, right? Like my experience with design, for example, was kind of a mixed thing during engineering, at least, because I mean, we had this subject called design of machine elements 1, design of machine elements 2. And, the worst part about that subject was that during your exam, you had to basically treasure hunt like 2 thick textbooks and find, the formulas in the right sequence. And I'm like, okay, I mean, this doesn't look in any way creative, and you're trying to solve a problem which would probably exist in the past, and it's not even a problem anymore, and you're just doing it for the sake of marks. And how do you deal with that kind of misconception? Because I was really taken off by design. I thought industrial design or something would be like that kind of, like, what do you say, like not so fun kind of a thing to do. So that was my misconception with respect to design, and maybe in a way industrial design as well. So what do you think, like in general, what are the common misconceptions that people have about design?
Design is one is it encourages originality and creativity. It's okay even if it's a design that might not work, but give your effort, right? So that encouragement for ideas is much more important than like industrial design, at least. Engineering design is a different
Okay.
ball game, right? Because it's more about finding out whether something is right or wrong.
Okay.
It's typically a black and white answer. There is
Okay.
no
Fair enough.
gray, right?
Fair enough.
It's not first principles thinking here. It's
Correct.
just trying to figure out whether this spring works. So it's like doing FEA. I mean, I'm not trying to put anyone down in that profession, but it's a different ball game. You definitely need engineering design and industrial design where there are some critical functional components.
Okay.
But again, that's typically done by engineers. But
Okay.
it's important for designers also to know how
The
things work and
practicalities of things.
practicality of in and out,
Okay. Okay.
even if they might not actually do it themselves, right?
Okay.
Like there might be CFD, computational fluid dynamics for AC,
Okay.
but as an industrial designer might just put the enclosure and where the components might go. But knowing where that air has to go and which is a hot part and cold part, which material I should use for the plastic,
True.
those things, what industrial designers need to know. So I think it's bridging that gap is where is the a sweet spot for a good product. So yeah, I wouldn't say it as one or the other, right? It's part of the process.
Okay. So what you're saying is basically everything is important, and industrial design is a step
In that process,
in the
yeah.
game, wherein let's say, so after industrial design, maybe the product goes towards engineering
design.
like just
Correct.
before production or something like that.
That's right. Like if you look at cars, right? If they have a design brief, typically it can be a page or 3 words, and that usually comes from the CEO or the design officer and says, okay, this year we are going to do a sports car which has this characteristics. There's some 3 words, subjective words,
Okay.
not even objective words. So you're dealing with subjectivity here.
Okay.
So now the designers, which might be 20, 30 people, they have to, drill down, make sketches, different ideas, just explore. That whole design funnel process, then they audit down. They'll select and
So
reduce
what
the
is
number
that
of.
process? You spoke of a design funnel process. So what is the process like?
Yeah, you start with, typically researching the problem. So trying to really ask, um, a lot of questions on why is that problem relevant and to the user especially. And then comes why is it relevant to the business and everything else. Like that's how I approach now these days as a consultant. I'm almost talking in that way. So that's the primary research, right? You're trying to kind of figure out what the real intent of the approach is, and if really there warrants a user research or some kind of a literature review where you go through some ton of research and come to some conclusion saying no, this is a problem, you got to solve this. So unless that is a given, right, usually designers don't go ahead, or even if they go ahead, it will be a suboptimal solution. So typically as a consultant, even if a client has done some amount of work, and usually I don't like to waste their time. I'm sure they would have done their own prior research to it. So typically I would just be honest and transparent and ask them, how was your approach to coming to that, saying this is a problem statement, so that we can be on the same page. So after that step happens is when you start exploring ideas. So you explore ideas, and after that, amongst those ideas, you weigh it between different options of which comes closer to the problem, the brand, and all those things, right? And then eventually drill down to one. And then comes the engineering side of it, where you make it functional. But it goes hand in hand. There is no one side true way for every industry, right? For medical devices, it's different. For sports products, it's different. Shoes is different. Furniture is different. So, but generally speaking, that thinking, what we are saying, design thinking, that process is very similar across the board.
So ultimately, the objective is to end up with a good design.
Yeah, that's right.
In terms of quality, I think, is it mainly about quality? So, like, how can anyone make better quality designs? in any industry, like a general, like is there some elements that go into it?
Right. See, quality can't exist in isolation. What I say is design is a messy process and needs to be messy. It can't be a clinical approach all the time. Because quality is a function of quantity, right? You might have heard of the story, right? A potter teaching how to make pots, ceramic pots, to students. After their classes were over, he gave an exam, 2 sections. One section he told, make as many pots as possible. The other section, make the most unique pots possible, right? So you might think the unique ideas will be amazing, but the section of students who actually made more quantity, first try of course they screwed up, but as they kept getting better, they were eventually judged on quality, by the way.
Okay.
And his point was not to judge them, but to show that it's quantity that leads to quality. After you make like 100 pots, your 100th pot will be really good because you have worked out the kinks and differences. But when you're making different pots, then you have to your mind is constantly thinking, how can this be different? You're never thinking about, is this really useful though?
Yeah.
So that's where you need to kind of strike a balance and know where to use when. A variety in ideas is essential in the very beginning of a process, right? In design, but when it comes to the quality of the design itself, you need to refine it multiple times.
So it's that kind of iterative process
It's an iterative process
that a designer has to go through.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I can find some similarities in the startup world as well.
Mm-hmm.
When before setting up any startup, the founder or his core team would want to figure out, like, okay, you have a problem statement, you found a solution, but the way you get to the solution has to be an iterative process, because you
Absolutely.
definitely don't get to the main solution, that's the workable solution. You don't get to it in a straight line.
Correct.
Because you go around in circles, and so there's something. Do you think all entrepreneurs are good designers? Like all good entrepreneurs are good designers in some way?
In a sense, serendipitously they can be. It's not that they need to be educated in design, right? If you look at any product in the market, version 1 of anything will be not good, right? It's always version 1.5 and 2 and 3. So I mean, the first iPhone did change things, but ideally speaking, is that the phone you would love to have? No, right? There were better phones, quality wise. But since it was the first smartphone concept, you have to make some sacrifice, saying, okay, if I have to try this technology out, let me become an adopter. So that's how I would think in business cycles, right? And business cycles for year one, version 1 might take like 5 years to get there, or 3 years to get there, in terms of R&D and production. So a designer has to be part of that process, maybe just for 2 years or 3 years, right? Because at times it can then jump into marketing and all the other functions. But it is it's a balancing act. The designer needs to know that they usually start the ball rolling at the very start, what we call as R&D in any company. But know that whatever product that gets shipped out is not the final product. And what I mean by that is they will always discover in the field someone is going to put an Amazon review, or troll them online saying this was a very bad feature or something, right? So that's when you realize nothing is really finished in design. It's always iterative, and that's where I think entrepreneurs and designers gel. But I think in India it still has to mature that design or industrial design has to be a part of the initial phase of things, right? It's still seen as something that is a final piecemeal.
Oh, with this wonderful conversation, I would like to ask you one final personal question.
Okay.
Which is like, if you were not associated with design, what would you do? You can also answer that, no,
Interesting.
I would do this only. But yeah.
No, that's a fair question. Very hard to say. I think I would be doing something in marketing, branding. Uh, I'm not really much of a, what do you say, uh, what is it? Analytical in the sense was to do something repetitive. For me, it has to be something new. And before I joined design, or before I actively pursued design, I was actually doing something in marketing and
True.
sales.
True.
So if I had continued that trajectory, I think I would be doing something in branding, brand marketeer, or something in marketing. Yeah.
Nice. I think all the questions were very well answered, and it it basically increased my curiosity to learn more about design.
Yeah.
And I'll definitely be reading the book that you suggested.
Absolutely. Yeah, I encourage anyone to be, feel free to reach out. I'm there on LinkedIn, Karthik.
Yes, definitely. We'll have a link down.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful to have you here. Thank you so much for coming to Work Theatre.
Thank you,
An
Karthik. Thank you
absolute
for
pleasure.
hosting me. I
Absolute
enjoyed this
pleasure.
conversation.
Yes, likewise. And I think, do you have any closing remarks for our audience? Anything?
Nothing in particular. Design seems sexy, but it is not really. So think through, your commitment to pursue a career. Career needn't necessarily be glorified. So that's my closing remark.
Nice. Thank you so much. Thanks again. It was absolutely wonderful to talk to you. And thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, buddy.
All right.